You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast, episode number 157. I'm always looking for authenticity in my films. They're based in realism. Sean Baker.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood when we really should be working on that next draft.
It's the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast,
Showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by three categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie's going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. And today's show is also sponsored by the Heart Chart Screenwriting Masterclass taught by legendary screenwriter James V. Hart, the writer of Bram Stoker's Dracula, Hook, and Contact, to name a few. His unique story mapping system will teach you how to get your script ready for production and the marketplace. To gain instant access, head over to bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/heart chart. That's HART chart. Well, guys, you are in for a treat today. We have returning champion, Oscar-nominated writer-director Sean Baker. Now, you might know Sean from his film Tangerine, which lit the entire independent film world on fire when it came out a few years ago because it was shot entirely on an iPhone and got a major release. His next project after that was The Florida Project, which got nominated for an Oscar. And his newest film is called Red Rocket, starring Simon Rex. And I had the pleasure of watching Red Rocket a few weeks ago, and I got to tell you, it's easily one of my favorite films of 2021. It is as Sean Baker of a film as you can get. The characters are vivid. It was shot beautifully on 16 millimeter film using anamorphic lenses. So this wide, giant scope of a film on a very little budget. We get into the weeds on how he made this film with a 10-person crew during COVID, and all the things that you might think of that, you know, once a filmmaker is nominated for an Oscar, they don't have to put up with, you know, hunting for locations and maybe stealing some shots and low budgets. Well, that's not the case. Sean wants to tell his stories, and he tells them the way he wants to say it. And that, unfortunately, sometimes is lower budget. So he was able to run and gun and make this amazing film with little time and little money during the middle of a pandemic. It is a remarkable feat, to say the least. The performances are amazing. Simon Rex should get nominated for an Oscar, as well as the film, and Sean as well, in my opinion. But let's jump in, man. Without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sean Baker. I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Sean Baker. How you doing, Sean?
Hey, how are you? It's great to be back.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Last time you were here, you had that little iPhone film that did okay.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, it did all right. But we're here to talk today. We're going to go a little bit into your process, and we're also going to talk about your amazing new film, Red Rocket, which I had the pleasure of watching a couple of weeks ago. And I was just, of course, floored by it. And it's so funny because I literally just moved to Austin. So I was in Texas, and I was just like, wow, this is just another part of Texas I did not know about.
Well, Texas is so big. I mean, you talk to people in West Texas and they have no idea of what's happening over in East Texas. So I understand. Did you watch that AFS?
No, I watched it at a press screening. There was a press screening.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I went to a press screening at it, and they're like, "Do you want to see Sean's new movie?" I'm like, "Yes." And I went in there. It's an experience. We'll talk about it.
Cool.
But for everybody listening who might not know what you've done, how did you get into the business? What drew you in?
Well, I've wanted to make films since I was 6 years old, when my mother brought me to the local library and they were showing clips from the Universal monster films. And I fell in love with an image from James Whale's Frankenstein, the burning windmill sequence at the end of the film. And I remember that the day before I wanted to be a construction worker. And the next day I was like, I want to be a filmmaker. So, that's the way that happened. Then I went through the cliche, that shooting Super 8 film until VHS rolled around. I'm showing my age right now.
Mm-hmm. You and me both. You and me both, brother. You and me both, brother.
Just taking in as much film at the time as I could, being in suburban New Jersey. So being exposed, using the video store essentially as my education, making, VHS films in high school, doing my video yearbook for my high school, the geeky AV club thing. Then going to NYU. I applied to USC, UCLA, and NYU. I forgot if I got into the other two, but NYU was like the one I really wanted to go to because at the time, it was really Spike Lee and Jarmusch had made such an impact, and I was there was something that was telling me, I'm already close to New York. I really want to embrace that New York indie thing that these guys have going on. So went to undergrad there. And during those 4 years, I got being in New York, this was still pre-internet, but I had access to a lot more in terms of repertory houses and Kim's Video Store. And, and being exposed to not only much, the greater world of independent film and discovering who Cassavetes was, et cetera, but also foreign film. Foreign film made its impact. So going into NYU with like aspirations of doing, making RoboCop or Die Hard down the line, it turned into me wanting to make Mystery Train down the line, like by the end of those 4 years. And, and then shortly after NYU, I pulled together enough money. Not shortly, I guess it was a few years, but we scraped together $50,000 by doing some corporate videos and commercials, enough to shoot my first film, 4-letter words, in '96 on 35 millimeter, actually, and it's being re-released this upcoming year. Finally restored. It's not a very good film. It's a young movie. All right. It's a very young movie, but it got me started. It took 4 years. I was in my 20s. Things were crazy, but, I eventually, it premiered at South by Southwest in 2000. And that was sort of my entry into that world. And then I'll wrap it up really quick by saying that Dogma 95 was really, really important at that time. And it made me shift I'd already, of course, was in it and wanted to continue and really, and my goal was to become an established filmmaker, but that really changed my focus. And that's what led to us making Takeout. And I think ever since Takeout, there's been sort of like I've been finding my way in that world of exploring, stories that, of communities, of subcultures that I'm not a part of, that I wanted to explore myself through these movies. So, and that has sort of been the through line ever since.
But I just want to put this out there. I do want to see your RoboCop and your Die Hard. If you want to remake them, I'll be first in the line to see your Sean Baker's RoboCop. That would be a very interesting, starring Simon Rex, obviously.
Yeah. It's weird because Verhoeven was like, that's the impact he had on me in high school, but then discovering his other films later and his earlier Dutch, sex-focused movies. Yeah. They were unfairly called sexploitation back in the day, but like films like, Turkish Delight and Spetters actually had a major influence on Red Rocket. So all these years later, it was his other movies that have had a direct impact.
Yeah, no question. And if you and anyone looking at RoboCop now, it's just not just an action movie. There's so much
Oh yeah,
commentary,
yeah.
so much commentary in a film like that. And I
And I have
remember,
my tickets bought for Benedetta already.
yeah, of
Seeing it at
course,
the Draft House this weekend.
that's awesome. Now I also remember watching the Florida Project which is your last film, and I don't know if I told you this, but I actually stayed in those hotels
Oh yeah.
growing up as a kid, because I lived in Florida and we would go up to Disney World, and that's that row of hotels that
Yeah.
you just park and go in and go out, and you wouldn't even realize what, I didn't even know that there was a subculture there. I just was a kid, so I was just there. So it's amazing how you were able to capture these kind of subcultures in a way, and you shine a light on subcultures that really don't get light shined on them at all.
Well, in that case, it was actually Chris Bergosh who brought that idea to the table, because he sent me an article about the children living in the extended stay motels in the shadow of Disney World, and I just found it incredibly compelling. And then also, I didn't even know the term hidden homelessness, so it was something I was learning, an issue that I was learning while developing this film, and so I just wanted to give you a background of like how that came to be. Yeah.
Right. Now, how did Red Rocket come to life?
That was actually based on research we had done for a film I made before Tangerine called Starlet, which was also focused on the adult film world. And during 10 years ago, when we were, making that film, we got to meet many people from the adult film world, and we realized that there was this archetype that existed. Men, usually male talent, who live off of female talent and exploit and use them in the adult film world. So, and they don't represent all men in the adult film world, but there is this archetype. They even have this slang term applied to them, suitcase pimp, which we use in the movie. And I have to say that, like, it was something that, even being on the set of Starlet 10 years ago, thinking there's a whole other movie for that can be made based on one of these guys. And so it was about 5 years later, when we finished up Florida Project, that we were entertaining a bunch of ideas. And that's when we said, should we tackle this? All right, let's start fleshing it out. And we fleshed it out. It took a few days because we already knew these guys, and we had interviewed some of them. So we had beginning, middle, and end. And it was even when I actually thought about Simon for it, because it was during the days of Vine, and he had a Vine presence, and he was entertaining the hell out of me. So I even remember texting one of my producers saying, and if we do make Red Rocket, it's going to be this guy. And I texted them one of Simon's Vine videos, and they laughed and said, okay, cool. It's, that's unique casting. But then it was all put on the back burner because we decided to move forward on another idea. And then COVID hit. And COVID shut down that idea because it was something that couldn't be made during a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And we pivoted back to Red Rocket, which was sitting on the back burner. And all it required was really just fleshing out. Because again, we had beginning, middle, and end broken down. We kind of knew the character, we knew the supporting characters. So it was really about finding our setting and just getting this thing spit out on paper.
So you casted Simon via Vine, essentially.
Yeah, and also Joseph Kahn's Bodied. It's a small indie by primarily music video director, but he's an indie filmmaker by the name of Joseph Kahn. He's
a fantastic.
Yeah. And Simon had quite a substantial cameo in that movie, and I forgot about this. There have been people who alerted me that I did this, but on Letterboxd, back when I watched Body back in the day, or a few years ago, I actually wrote, like, can somebody give Simon Rex a dramatic role already? And so I think that may have been the one that really was like, that cemented the idea that I want to work with this guy. So, and yes.
So when you're casting, because you have some of the most impeccable casting decisions of your generation of filmmakers, honestly, like you pick up, like there's no place that Simon Rex is on the list for this part, but yet he should get an Oscar nomination. There's no question he should get it. He's
thank you. I agree.
He's brilliant in this. He was like born to play this part, and I don't mean that in a negative way because of the part. He's not playing the nicest human being on the planet,
right?
But how he's able to bring that character to life. Can you give any tips on your process of casting? Like, how do you make the decision? Because I'm assuming, after your success with Tangerine and Florida Project, I mean, you probably get pitched constantly, like, oh, this actor and this actor, and this guy has a bigger box office or this or that. How do you?
Yeah, I actually have returned emails to agents saying, sorry, your actor is too famous. You're like, what?
They must, which I'm sure they love. I'm sure they love that.
But and it's only me. It's shooting myself in my foot every single time. No. I love the fresh faces. I actually take that cue from Spike Lee. Spike Lee always, even if he put A-listers in his films as the leads, he was always surrounding them with fresh faces. I think I saw Samuel Jackson for the first time in Jungle Fever. And being like, oh my God, who is this guy? Thank you for bringing him into the talent pool. I mean, he's incredible. So that's what I look to do every time. And also, I just, regarding, my first timers, I just, keep my eyes open. I just keep my eyes open. I street cast even when I'm not in current development. Susanna Sun came about because we saw her at the ArcLight Hollywood in the lobby. And she was coming in those glass doors while we were over near the ticket booth, and we looked over and saw her and just thought she had that quality that can't be defined. It's that it quality. It's that aura, that energy that says I'm a star. And you can see watching that person on the big screen for 2 hours, and wanting to see that person on the big screen for 2 hours. So, you exchange information, you keep that person on file, and then you hope that everything comes together. They have the enthusiasm to do it and they have the talent to do it. And I've been very lucky where I've surrounded myself with these first timers who all have that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And how do you, I have to ask you, because the performances that you pull out of your actors or the collaboration that you have with these actors, how do you approach directing actors? Because I mean, their performances from Tangerine up until, just your last 3 year entire filmography, but the last 3 films specifically, some of the performances you've pulled out, they get nominated. Not that means anything, but they're really good. How do you approach the directing acting process?
Thank you. I mean, every individual is different, even if they are experienced, very
like Willem,
or like I consider my 3 leads actually experienced actors in Red Rocket, because I didn't mention that, even though I met Susanna Sun on the street casting, I discovered after the fact that she already had an Instagram presence. And the reason that she was in Hollywood is because she had just moved there as an aspiring actor. So, I consider her, and Brie Elrod, who plays Lexi in the film. She's had, 2 decades of theater experience, and she was in a small role in Shutter Island. And then Simon, who's been in this world for quite a while. They're the experienced actors. They're the ones who come with like years of experience, or not years, but they come with that. And then you have first timers who have all different levels of, experience, aspirations, comfort levels. So each one is different. Everybody's different. And it's really just about becoming friends, being very casual, being transparent, making them feel comfortable, becoming a family unit in which nobody is embarrassed about anything. I do actually encourage improvisation in my films all the time. I love it. We have pretty much, we do have a fleshed out script, and especially with Red Rocket, because Red Rocket was shot in such a fast, there was COVID and small, a small budget. So we had very limited amount of time. So out of all my films, probably Red Rocket is the most scripted, with all those Mikey Saber rants and everything. Those are all scripted. But I still I want my cast to improvise, and you never want them to feel put on the spot. You know what I mean? You want them and never feel embarrassed about trying things and experimenting. And so, I have my incredible actors who are so incredibly brave and bold. They'll go in front of a camera and they'll try something. And if it doesn't work, who cares? It doesn't work. Let's go for an alt take and try something else.
Right.
And getting everybody in that place where everybody's comfortable and feels safe.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And Red Rocket was perfect for that because it was like a small 10-person crew, tiny. We were a pod. We were very isolated. And it just allowed for that. It was a good environment. And then, one more thing I'm going to add. Since Florida Project, I've been working with a coach, my wife and producer, Samantha Kwan. And she worked with the three children on Florida Project. But it was during Florida Project that I told her, I have these, the two moms. I decided that I'm going to cast them with essentially first timers. So can you help me out with the moms? And because Samantha's female, there's that really helps as well. They might feel more comfortable at first with another woman, and she's also very maternal. So there's, that really showed me during Florida Project that Samantha brings a lot to the table there. And so with Red Rocket, I was able to give some of the first timers to Samantha and say, why don't you guys workshop? Why don't you guys try these scenes out? I'm focusing on this. Tell me when you're ready for me to watch it. I would come in, watch where they were going, give them tweaks, give them notes. And it was really a great. So Samantha has been very much a part of that new process.
And are there any other tips that you can give about directing non-actors? Because you've had a few of those in your films over the years of either new actors specifically, but more like non-actors, of people who just don't act.
It's always saying, hey, if you don't feel comfortable, if the scripted dialogue is not rolling off their tongue, I'm never precious with any of the stuff we write, except unless it's a really good line I'm proud of, or it's exposition.
Sure.
I'm okay with saying, put this in your own words, or how would you say it? Especially if they're from that area or part of the culture that we're focusing on. It really is invaluable because they'll bring stuff that you never would have. They elevate your script. They make it more realistic. They bring in slang that you didn't know about. There was plenty of that in Red Rocket, plenty of it. Like Brittany Rodriguez, just asking her in the moment, saying, this scene there's something about this line that's playing a little bit like an East Coast New Yorker wrote this line. Can you help me out? And she would think about it for a little while and then come back with some ideas. And so there was that collaboration. Should I give you an example from Red Rocket?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it. Yeah, this will be afterwards.
Okay, cool. So when Leandria, who plays her mother in the film, I'm talking about Brittany Rodriguez plays June. Her mother is Leandria, played by Judy Hill. Judy Hill is talking to Simon and realizing that he has dropped his Texas accent. And in the script, it was just like, where is your accent? Or where'd your accent go? A very bland, boring line. And so in the moment, I said, I don't like this. It's not exciting. Let's bring some local color to it. Brittany, anything? And Brittany was like, he sounds brand new. And I was like, perfect. All right, Leandria, that's what you're going to say. So you sound brand new. Stuff like that. Stuff like those little, just that little, those little details, add so much. And that's what you get out of sometimes working with these, the first timers who have a parallel life experience and can actually bring that to the table.
Right. And I love that you can tell in your films that you are not precious about the dialogue because it just seems so natural, rolls off the tongue so much. And you can just, as a director, you look at things and you're like, okay, that either that was an amazing performance or they're just kind of rolling with it and are in the moment. And you can tell that, especially in Red Rocket, there was a lot of that going on in the background. But with a lot of the improvisation that's going on set, what is your writing process like? How do you start writing a movie like Red Rocket?
Well, each one's different. Each one is different. Like this one I didn't even see Chris. I mean, Chris and I were basically Zooming. Right. And then we had a shared Google Doc. So it was one of those things. And because we had broken it down years ago, and I already knew beginning, middle, and end, it was more about just like taking on these major rants and taking on the dialogue. And so, we would just write it out and share it with one another and give each other notes. And yeah, so in this case, it was very remote writing, and a lot of writing in Galveston, Texas, actually in my Airbnb, weeks before we were actually shooting. But everyone's
approach is different.
Everyone's different. Oh, the one thing I do want to, the one consistency of all my writing experiences is that we always have the end worked out in our heads before we even open up final draft. Endings are very important for me. They really, at my favorite films have very impactful endings that keep you thinking as you're exiting the theater and interpreting and sometimes writing your own ends. And I appreciate those movies. And so I always keep that in mind. I mean, I won't open up final draft until we have beginning, middle, and end worked out.
Now, I always love asking creatives this. What do you do to tap into the zone, that creative well that we all have? We all have, I always say we have our personal creative wells that we can tap into. And sometimes you're in the zone and sometimes you're not in the zone. What is there something that you do in your writing process that you get into your mind in a mind frame where you can then accept the muse, if you will? The muse shows up and starts helping you.
I wish I could say there is something. It's usually a producer holding a gun to my head saying, "You better get this done now." So it's actually there's a lot of procrastination, a lot of napping, but I think moments of inspiration come where you're not least expecting it. Sometimes when you're in a movie theater watching somebody else's film, where you're just like, "Now I got that figured out. Okay, I can't wait." So it's really just I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't tell you one specific thing. It's more about like just allowing it to come. And giving time and also giving yourself deadlines. We have to as human beings, we have to, or at least for me, I have to have deadlines. So in order, and that crunch time seems to speed things up, seems to speed up the creative juices that they get flowing during that crunch time. So it's really just about discipline. Quite honestly, it's about discipline and,
showing up, and the muse will show up with you.
Essentially.
Now, as directors, there's always that one day on set that the entire world is coming crashing down around you. You're losing the sun, the camera broke, there's an elephant running through your shots, something. Yeah. What was that day on Red Rocket and how did you overcome it?
Well, I realized I couldn't overcome it. So it was an acceptance during pre-production that I was going to have to accept all these freaking limitations. And I broke a chair. I never do that. I'm not a violent guy. I don't get physical, but it was one day that my essentially this whole scene that I had written would be impossible to do based on our budget. I can't tell you what it is, but it was a big set piece that required stunts and everything. And I'm just like, I realized at that point that I have no choice. I locked myself into this budget of this type of movie. These COVID and everything else is imposing these limitations. And I lifted up a plastic chair and I broke it on the front porch in front of everyone.
I can't take it anymore.
But that was it. That was like the cathartic, like, okay, I guess that's it. Because from that point on, we had disasters every 3 hours where we would like lose something or this and that, but it was chill. It was like, we're not going to freak out because we realize we do not have the money and we do not have the time to throw at problems. So instead of tackling those problems, we'll pivot and go another direction. And then all the serendipity and all these happy accidents started coming our way. So every day, even though there was like a problem every 3 hours, there was also a miracle every 3 hours. So every day I was getting these miracles where I was like, oh my God, that happened today? Like that happened today? The whole thing with the train and the proposal, that whole big scene was, of course it was timed. We knew it was coming, but we only had one chance to do it because the train only came in once a day. We had 20 minutes prep and like things just worked out so wonderfully in that moment. Like the conductor was blowing his horn at the perfect moment that would complement the dialogue and the scene. So a lot of those gifts from the film gods came our way as soon as I was open to them. Yeah.
Now, were you essentially running and gunning like an ENG crew almost sometimes? I mean, there was obviously a plan for the day, but when you pivot, you're like, okay, we're going to go do this now. Let's go. And you would just have to kind of come up with it on the fly almost.
Yes. There was an incredible amount of running and gunning. It felt like a guerrilla film making from, well, I guess you could say it was like very much like Tangerine. We were just on the street and we were like, oh, this dialogue scene, we're not feeling this right now. So let's just do this instead. Or like, let's just follow Mikey on the bike for 3 hours, see what happens, there was a lot of that, a lot of stealing scenes, meaning that we didn't always have permits.
I was going to ask you that. So it seems like when you're watching the movie and you basically have the run of the town, but I'm assuming like they had to like just kind of grab some stuff here and there that they didn't technically have a permit.
a lot. And it's as long as you do it safely, there's no problem with that.
Sure, of course.
Not like it's against the law. So, we were always doing it safely, and we were and I think we just embraced that spontaneity. We were saying there's improv in front of the camera, so why can't there be improv behind the camera? And
well, that's great. I love that line. I love that line.
And also Drew Daniels and his team are just, they're geniuses. I mean, the fact that they pulled that off, a 4-person camera crew pulled off those images. You had Drew Daniels, you had a first AC, a second AC, and a gaffer grip, meaning one person doing both gaffing and gripping. Chris Hill, who worked on Zola recently as well. He's amazing. So those 4 guys, then you did sound. And then you had our sound, a one-man sound team, Alex Altman. He did
mixing and booming at the same time.
Yep. And then you had my sister, who is Stefanik, and she is the production designer on the film. And then every other role, which is only 4, right? Because those are 6 people. And then you have 4 others making a crew of 10. The other 4 members were just producers wearing many, many hats. And they were all wearing them so well. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. Shi Ching Zhou, who is actually in the film. She plays Miss Fan at Donut Hole.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, well, she's also doing continuity while acting. And she's also doing costume design. And she was also responsible for, a little bit of transportation here and there. So, you can see like how much everybody is giving their all.
It was an indie movie. It truly was an indie movie. And what I love about your career as I've been following it is that, after success of Tangerine, and then of course, after Florida Project, you could easily go down the bigger budget roads. I'm sure they've been offered, those kind of films might've been offered to you, but you really still want to stay in the world that you have 100% control over and explore stories that might not be, doesn't have a superhero in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And it's tempting, I know it's definitely tempting.
Sure. I'm sure.
Because of monetary purposes.
I'm sure. The checks, the checks must be insane.
Yeah. That's the big thing that I'm always conflicted about. I'm like, should I make my life easier and make a film for a studio or work, go to a series? But I've been starting to work in commercials, which really helped. That's like my side hustle, which is like my main bread and butter. And even if you get 1 spot a year, it's going to pay you a lot better than working in indie film. But then on top of that, but it's more than that. It's about like, if you, I'm so neurotic, and it's like, I just want to sleep at night, so I just want to sleep and not beat myself up by, I feel like, I want to tell personal stories. Films take a long time. They take over 2 years. You put all of your energy, all of your heart into them. So why not make the movie you want to make? And so I look at the filmmakers that I admire who've had personal visions, and each film is different and each film is unexpected. And yet they've stayed true to their vision. The Jarmusch's, PTA's, Spike Lee's, these are the people who molded my career. And so I follow their path.
Fair enough. Yeah. Now, do you rehearse with your actors?
Yeah, we do. Sometimes not too much. I don't like to over rehearse. I think that's dangerous. sometimes with first timers, you want to over rehearse. It all comes down to it all comes down to the individual. And as I mentioned earlier with Samantha Kwan, she's been wonderful now, because sometimes it's not really for me, but it's more for the actors, just to make them feel comfortable, just doing workshops and doing repetition of the scenes I don't even have to see them all the time, as long as they're just there doing them. But the rehearsals for me, it's usually just it's just about, I'm already confident my actors can pull it off. They're already 95% there. So my rehearsals are about just tweaking and maneuvering and guiding. I do.
Now, I have to ask, when you pitched this project to Simon, and you sent him the script and the role, because this is a challenging role, and it's a very exposing role in many ways. Did he was he hesitant, or he's like, "Oh, I'm so in"?
He was pretty much all in. I mean, he did. I honestly don't remember many of our early conversations, except for the fact that we just he was on board, he was excited, and we discussed the character, discussed sort of the character traits that I saw in the Mikey Sabers that I had met. Mm-hmm. And said to him, this is you're going to be playing a man-child here. You're going to, and all of those characteristics that come with the suitcase pimp. And he had watched some of the interviews I had done of some gentlemen from that world. So but he didn't watch too much. He was like, I don't want to do I don't want to do an impersonation, but I got the vibe. I got the energy. Plus, he said, I've been in Hollywood for the last 3 decades. I can pull from a lot of that. I can pull from the narcissistic, sociopathic jerks from the industry and really use that. So I think he used that, quite honestly. And so again,
you mean to tell me there's egos in Hollywood? No, stop it. Now, do you ever storyboard? Do you shot list, or do you just kind of flow with it on the day?
I don't storyboard simply because I can't draw, and I haven't had the budget to hire a storyboarder. But I've storyboarded on spots, commercial spots, and I really like it. But I also just I'm my own editor. I edit all of my films, so I always have my editing hat on all the time. So when I'm shot listing, I do shot list, especially on a film like Red Rocket, in which we had to run and gun. So that sometimes it's a week before, sometimes it's a night before, where I'm sitting down with my producer and we're figuring out all the coverage of a scene, and sometimes with my DP as well, like how we're going to cover this. And so it's even though there, as I mentioned earlier, there is improv behind the camera, there also is a control behind the camera. And we know how we're going to, especially if it's a controlled scene and it's a set piece, we will have it worked out. And then there are other scenes, like, say, the sabotage moment at the end of the movie, in which you have two seasoned actors in there, and the rest all non-professionals, or first-timers, sorry. First-timers, I don't like using the word non-professional.
Because they were professional first-timers.
Yeah, exactly. We were in a tiny room together, and there's a lot of chaos. And in that moment, I was like, it's best just to do what they call hosing down. So Drew, you're going to hose down we're going to do multiple takes where you're just all over the place. And I'm not going to tell you where to go. You just go where you want to go. Or sometimes I'll guide you, but it's more about just being as spontaneous with the handheld camera as the actors are being in the moment. And so there's that, but then there's also the very controlled, I think you can see with Red Rocket, we were pulling a lot from the controlled cinema of Spielberg with, Sugarland Express and Vilmos Zsigmond's cinematography.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have dollies, we have very controlled camera moves, very controlled framing. And so it's really about, it's about mixing it up and finding time to tackle it.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was all handheld the entire time. It had a very Sugarland Express vibe to it. That's a great way to think about it, because it did have that kind of control vibe, but yet it still had that kind of on the moment ENG documentary vibe almost sometimes as well. And you decided, if I'm not mistaken, you shot this on film, right?
Yes, we did. Primarily. I mean, there were some night scenes that had to be shot digitally because of low light. And then we had to do a tremendous amount of treatment in post for it to match the 16, which I think, my incredible colorist, Al Arnold at Photochem, did wonderfully.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Super 16. I'm sorry, 16 anamorphic. So we were using anamorphic lenses for 16 that is very rare in feature filmmaking. Yeah. I think the lenses we actually used, from what I know, and I don't know if I haven't gotten confirmation on this, but I think we are the only feature to have used these Panavision 16 anamorphics. They've been used primarily on commercials and music videos and fashion films. But we were able to capture a look with this that I think is very different from the average 16 millimeter look. It's a real throwback. It has the proper scope of like of a Hollywood film in some ways, yet it's still very gritty. The way it captured that landscape, we needed that 2:3:5 aspect ratio to do that. And Drew Daniels is so fast on 16 that he would have a setup ready to go before I knew it. And usually he was waiting on me, it's usually on a set. It's like, how long is camera going to take? Or, and
waiting on sound.
Yeah. Yeah. And Drew would just look at me and he's like, I'm waiting on you. I'm waiting on you, dude.
Now there's another part of this movie that you have forever changed the meaning of NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye. For me, forever and ever and ever. Because it's essentially because I think it's in the trailer too, right? They use that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so they use it. So when I saw it in the trailer, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a lot of fun. But then as you use it and the way you use it in the movie it's the only song to use, right?
Yeah, well, we have music coming out of radios and that big puddle of mud song, which actually cost a lot for the strip joint. But besides that, NSYNC's Bye 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 is the
score. Is the score. Yeah. So there was no, is there any reason why you didn't want to fill it in with some score or other music?
You know what? I haven't used score ever, actually.
Okay.
And even though I love soundtracks, some of my favorite films have incredible lush wall-to-wall soundtracks. My subject matter, I'm usually, it's hard to go with the overly scored thing is something I try to avoid this because it's what'll age the fastest with your films. I think scores age the quickest. And then on top of that, there's that manipulation. It's a very blatant manipulation that comes with scoring. And these days where I think films are kind of overly scored, and I don't mean to slam any movies, but I mean like the constant strings. We get it.
Yeah, I know. I need to be sad here. I need to be excited here. I get it.
Yeah, this is how you should feel. And that's the last thing I want to do. I want to, present very objectively my stories and characters and without judgment. And so I want the audience to, I want to allow the audience to feel what they are feeling without manipulating. So the closest I ever came to a score was, I think, in Starlet, where I kind of had a repetition of one track by an artist by the name of Manuel. And that was like a consistent repetition to the point, and it was ambient. It was an ambient track. So it became sort of a score, but I've been avoiding that with my work, and I don't know whether that'll change soon.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, and when you were editing, because I've been an editor for 25 years, so I know how the process of cutting it goes. What is your process as far as do you just do a rough cut, or like you just like assemble it all? What did you cut on, by the way? What did you cut on?
We cut on Adobe Premiere.
Oh, good. Okay. So yeah. So do you jump in and out of a color, to see if things work? What is your process?
No, well, our wonderful colorist, who I mentioned earlier, Al Arnold, he gave us a LUT that kind of worked universally.
Okay, good.
But so I didn't have to worry much with color. But then I'm kind of crazy. I go right to a fine cut. That's my I know it's weird. Wow. I don't do an assemble. I don't do a rough. I don't even move on to the next scene until the scene that I'm tackling is polished, and I'm talking polished. I mean,
tight. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm even doing sound design on that scene before moving to the next scene. So to tell you the truth, I don't know whether the movie works as a whole until the last day of the edit, until I've like locked the fine cut. And so, yeah, it's kind of nerve wracking for my producers, especially. And for me, I'm just like, well, I lose my mind. Every post-production has been a little difficult. I've been getting better, but I go into that whole like living, nocturnally. I become a vampire. It's a few months of insanity, but yeah, it's something that I find necessary because it's like I put my signature on it. I find my film ultimately in post-production, and it's like 50% of my directing in a way. So, and you know what, these days I have to say with Florida Project, I've learned a lot about what I can do in post. Like we're living in a day and age where they used to say, never say you can fix it in post because you can't. Now you can. Now there's a lot you actually can.
There is.
And I'm doing a lot of cleanup. I'm doing a lot of split screens, invisible split screens. I'm doing mats that you would never see, but stuff that has really allowed me as a director to even be directing further in post and manipulating even timing of performance sometimes. And so that's been really like this new, it's made editing fresh for me again.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Fincher loves. He just spends days and weeks and months doing exactly that, like doing split screens, changing performances, adding one performance from here and another performance from there, and mixing different takes. And like really, you're still directing at that point.
Exactly. I watched the Mank DGA Q&A he did, and he said that almost every frame of that film was manipulated to some degree in post. And that's incredible. I was doing so much of that with Red Rocket, cleaning up little things and here and there.
Sure.
Like for example, with Donut Hole, which is almost supposed to be this. It's supposed to be otherworldly. It's supposed to be almost it could be seen as Mikey's fantasy. It's not totally based in the real world. I'd be cleaning up stuff that just made that space less congested and prettier. So I would take away, electric cords. I would take away a sign I didn't like, and so that's possible these days. And it's really, I don't know, it's inspiring for me because it's like a new way of filmmaking in a way.
And I see a sense, a theme with the donut shops in your films. From Tangerine, which is no longer a donut shop.
No, I think it still is. They change it? Because last time I drove by, it was closed. And then when did you drive by? I don't know.
Like a year ago.
Oh no, it's still open. It's Trejo. It's Danny.
Oh no, yes, Treno's Donuts. That's right. Right. Yeah. I thought Danny did something there.
Yeah. So, I'm going to disappoint you now because I wish I could tell you that that donut hole was written in the script, but it was actually something found during pre-production and worked into the movie. We had written it for a food truck outside of the refineries that Strawberry would be working at. But when Alex Coco, one of my great producers, and I were driving past Donut Hole in Groves, Texas, which is right next to Port Arthur, we saw this incredible donut shop called Donut Hole with like right next to the refineries with the perfect colors and this great parking lot and this little wink that it does to one of my previous films and maybe even the sexual connotations that come from, people
donut hole
donuts. Yeah, exactly. Everything seemed to work so wonderfully that we were like, this is a gift from the film gods and we better accept it. So,
that's awesome. Yeah. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Yeah, it's a very, the industry is changing all the time and right in front of our eyes. So it's so hard the advice that I would have given maybe even 5 years ago has changed. It really, you have to decide on what you want to do. Number one, do you want to make feature films? Do you want to make a series? Do you want to, there are different ways. There's so many different avenues these days, web series, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what's important is just to get started. It's just to to get going in some way or another, work in some aspect of the industry. I mean, for a long time, I was doing everything I could do, doing corporate videos, editing wedding videos, just so that I could actually have practice. And at the time, yeah, you're beating yourself up saying, oh, what I feel like I'm so isolated outside the industry, but you are practicing your craft. And that's very important, to keep practicing your craft. And then also don't wait. That's another thing. That's the biggest thing for me. If you're going to make a feature, don't wait, meaning the tools are there now to do it. You can pick up your iPhone, you can shoot a film, you can edit it at home on Premiere, and you can present it to the world and see whether the world accepts it. You may want a $50 million budget, but let's be realistic. That's not going to come right away. You're going to have to build to that. And I always remember a friend of mine from way back in the 90s said, I don't want to make my first feature until, I have the $20 million to do it right. And unfortunately, that guy still hasn't made a film. And that always is like, and I had to make these scrappy little movies, my first film, tiny little thing I shot. My second film, Takeout, that I co-directed with Shi Ching Zhou, we made that for $3,000 on mini DV. And, that's being, that's now, well, it's being restored and put out into the world next year again. And so, it can be done. Just do it and do it. Yeah.
just go, basically just be Nike. Just go do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
Oh gosh. I think one thing that I'm still learning is just that carpe diem rule is, to live in the moment, to appreciate the moment, to be full of gratitude. As human beings, we sometimes, fall into the pity party thing. We sometimes compare ourselves to others. We always compare ourselves to others. We have envy, but I feel that, it's taken me a while, but I just want to live in the moment and appreciate it and be happy about, where you are. I think that's an important thing. And it's something I hope I answered that question.
It's perfectly fine. That was great. And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh, it changes all the time.
Sure.
But, my top 3, but I always look at Lars von Trier's The Idiots, which was I think Dogma number 2, as something that just has inspired me so much and continues to inspire me. So The Idiots, Harold and Maude. I think you can see Harold and Maude all over my film Starlet. And then just Hal Ashby in general in my films. And then Chang Dong Lee's Oasis is such an incredible film that's underrated, because a lot of people know Chang Dong Lee's films he made after Oasis, but I think people should go back and watch Oasis. It's such a bold film that would never be made in this country at this time, and yet I think is a necessary film, and a film that really is profound. So Chang Dong Lee's Oasis. And
where can people see your film, and when is it coming out?
Well, thank you for asking. A24 is starting a limited run on the 10th of December, so it'll open up in New York and Los Angeles on the 10th. In a few select theaters, and then the next weekend start to roll out into other cities. So I would just say check A24's website and check local listings. But it just to let you know, though, it's an exclusive theatrical run, which I'm so happy about, and so thankful to A24 for allowing this in a day when, there's a lot of day and dates and a lot of streaming titles that are just going directly to home video. This is what we shot this for the big screen. As you can tell, we really wanted this I know it looks great on the big screen, because I got to see it at the New Beverly last night on 35 millimeter. And so I hope people, if they feel comfortable and, if they feel safe, to go to the theater, see it on the big screen. And I think, that's all. I'm not the best pitch guy, but I truly hope people are able to see this on the big screen.
And I second that, because I did see it on the big screen, and it is It is like for a 16 millimeter film, it's probably one of the more epically shot 16 millimeter, not even Super 16, but 16 millimeter films I've ever seen, especially projected. It's absolutely stunning and gorgeous to look at. And you really do feel like you're there. So, Sean, I truly appreciate you being on the show. I wish you nothing but continued success. I'm sure the film's going to do very well. I hope Simon gets that Oscar nod, because God, wouldn't that be amazing if he did? What a
very
comeback.
fact that we're even in the discussion is like a and the very fact that we even made this film is a win for us. I remember when we were going to Cannes, it was like we already won just by being here. So we're in a very good place. And however it plays out, it's just gravy at this point. Yeah.
Congrats, my friend. You're welcome back at any time for any of your future films. So I do appreciate you. And thank you for all the inspiration that you've given filmmakers around the world, because I hear constantly, well, Sean Baker did Tangerine. So like, I mean, you could just grab an iPhone. I hear that every day almost for film. And it's so there's a lot of inspiration you put out there. So even though while you're doing your work, you are inspiring another generation of filmmakers, brother. So thank you again for all you do, my friend.
That's nice to hear. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Sean so much for coming on the show and dropping his knowledge bombs on the tribe today. Thank you so much, Sean, not for just coming on the show, but for the continued inspiration you give the entire independent film community. Thank you again, sir. If you want to check out his new film, Red Rocket, it is opening in theaters today, December 10th, exclusively, might I add, so it will not be available anywhere online until after the new year. So I implore you guys, if you want to check out an amazing independent film, and now you know the backstory of how it was made, check out Red Rocket. If you want to get links to anything we spoke about in this episode, head over to the show notes at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/157. And before I go, guys, I have been working on a very big project coming out that will help build the tribe even more. Keep an eye out. It should be coming out in early 2022, and I will probably be announcing it very, very soon. So just keep an ear out for that, guys. Thank you so much for listening, guys. As always, keep on writing, no matter what. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv.